Hello YouTube, this is Michael Kennedy of the Moving to Delaware Beaches channel, and today I'm going to share with you the huge mistake new construction buyers make. You know, picture this. You're driving through a beautiful new community here in Delaware, or any state for that matter. You see the flags, you know, they're flapping in the breeze, the model home sign, and you think, I'm just going to pop in. I'm going to take a look. Stop right there. Do not do it. Trust me, and you're about to find out why. Walking into the sales office without your own agent is the single biggest mistake you can make when buying a new home in Delaware or any state. Today I'm going to tell you why the builder's representative, as nice as they are not your friend. And I want you to remember that. They're not your friend. They don't work for you, they work for the builder. So how could you lose thousands in free upgrades? Why going it alone might actually cost you the most money? Let's dive into that right now. So we're going to talk about the who works for who reality check right here. So the first thing you need to understand is builder hierarchy. The person sitting in that air-conditioned sales office, as much as a lovely person they are, and I love every single one of them because I was one of them for 10 years of my life right out of college, but they don't have a fiduciary responsibility to you. They do to the builder because they are the builder's employee. So their job is to get the builder the highest price with the fewest concessions. Now that's not always the case because every salesperson is paid a little bit differently within the house. But the reality is, and I want you to remember this, is the builder's sales rep is not paid differently if you are represented or not represented. So it's not going to hurt their feelings. It's more of a corporate decision. So that's the biggest piece right there. So I titled this chapter, The First Visit Trap. You know, because I want you to picture this. Here's the little dirty secret of the industry, the first visit rule. Most builders in Delaware have a policy that if you don't bring your realtor on your very first visit to the community, that realtor cannot represent you later. You know, the builder will literally lock you out of representation. Why do they do that, you ask? Because that 2.5%, 3.5%, they're going to be able to keep on their books because they're a publicly traded builder or they're just a corporation. But they'd rather not pay a buyer's agent commission, even though that commission is already baked into the marketing budget of the home. You don't get a discount for not having an agent. You know, you go into Shell Brothers, you go into K-Hop, you go into Lennar. They are not going to miraculously give you that discount. I've had that conversation time after time with clients. Yeah, I recently had one as a finance professor, and one of the things that he thought was, oh, I'm going to be able to negotiate a better deal if I don't have an agent. And you know what the builder told him? He said, we don't do that. You either have representation or you don't have representation. But the reality of having representation is you've got somebody here who is an expert in the market, who knows the market, and they are your boots on the ground. So a lot of people will tell me, they say, the price is the price with a builder. That's not always true. While they they're rarely going to drop the base price because it does hurt their comparables for future sales. A realtor knows where the flex is. For example, around the holidays, they're going to have some additional incentives if you donate a bike to a local charity or you bring in canned goods. If it's the end of a life cycle of a quick move-in home. Once that home gets further along in the build process, that's where you're going to start to see the price reductions come through. Now, granted, you do roll the risk that somebody else picks it up before then, so it doesn't get to that rock bottom price. But sometimes you get lucky. But that's all those things that we need to discuss and really talk about what's important to you. And then one of the other things you're going to talk about is the design center. These builders have $2 million, $1 million, $500,000 design studios. And the reality is the markup on some of these options, you got to assume that it's at least 100%. But the reality is we're going to sit down and we're going to have a really high-level conversation about what things you're willing to do now versus what things you're willing to do later. And one of the biggest things that I always tell my clients is, focus on the home site, or what builders will sometimes call the lot. Because that you cannot change. You can change whether or not you have a tile backsplash in your kitchen. You can change the flooring in your bedrooms and bathrooms. But the reality is you can't change the home site. So you really need somebody in your corner to make you aware of these things and be talking and thinking about it before you make a very costly decision. A new home does not mean that it is going to be perfect. I say this to every single one of my clients with new construction is, it is built by humans, which means there is going to be human error. The reality is I've seen it where they've missed installation. There's a structural header, installed backward. There's a plumbing leak before the drywall even goes up. But you know what? The reality is a good realtor is going to insist on, at least walking that home with you prior to the pre-drywall inspection, or at least making sure, if I can't personally be there for that pre-drywall inspection, you know what you're looking for and what you're asking about. And most importantly, a home inspection. You've got to get a home inspection with new construction. Now, some of my clients will opt to get, multiple inspection stages, and it all depends on the builder too. Some of the builders won't let you go on the roof. They won't let you take off the panel cover. But those are things that you can do after the fact. But every single one of these builders here is going to offer a 1-year gutter-to-gutter workmanship warranty. So the reality is I highly recommend you do one before you settle and or before your 12 months is up. So right around 10 or 11 months, just to ensure this beautiful asset that you've now purchased. So buying a home is the biggest investment of your life. Don't do it with a representative who's paid to look out for the seller. If you're thinking about moving to Delaware and looking at new construction, or just thinking about moving to Delaware in general, it doesn't matter whether it's NB Homes, Ryan Homes, Lennar, D.R. Horton, Insight Homes, Fox Lane Homes, Shell Brothers, the list goes on. Reach out to me first. Give me a call, shoot me a text, shoot me an email, but do not step foot in that model home. And also, don't request information on the builder's website before you contact me, because then that way we can make sure that we're registered. So again, as always, thanks for tuning in on this more of a public service announcement than anything, versus a new community walkthrough. But again, this is really important stuff, and I want to make sure that this sinks in for everybody, because this is where representation starts, and it starts at your first visit in the community. Thanks for tuning in. Make sure to like and subscribe down below.